It's Friday here on Locked On Dolphins, and we're bringing this week to a close by looking at some mock drafts across the internet to see who people are mocking to your Miami Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, and the NFL draft lead for the 33rd team. I want to give a special shout out and welcome to our everydayers, because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it. Here on the Locked On Network, today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code in all lowercase Locked On NFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. The NFL Draft is a very popular event for fans of every fan base because just about every fan base leaves the draft thinking they won. It's a Super Bowl in which all 32 fan bases can enjoy and revel in and bask in. And it's been an event that up until this past season, the Dolphins have not been particularly active in by choice. And you can't help but feel like out of necessity of where the roster's at and the transition that this team is facing, regardless of who was brought back or not brought back, ideologically, you have to get back to your roots. And it feels like that is an imminent portion of this offseason when you consider the team's already scheduled to have 10 draft picks. And everybody loves mock drafts and hypotheticals. So I pulled up 6 mock drafts from across the internet. And we're going to look at each one of the 6, and we're going to explore who, as of the middle of January, are the names that are being tied to the Dolphins. And obviously, the work that I do, I just dropped the top 100 big board over at the 33rd team. So I have plenty of opinions on all of the players and their potential fit within Miami. And it's a great opportunity for us to kind of look at those players, start to have some conversations about these players, what makes sense, what the questions I have with players that are fit in, opportunity cost later in the draft. And just kind of finish this week with a fun series of hypotheticals. So with that in mind, the first one that I'm going to tap into comes courtesy of Josh Edwards at CBS Sports. This posted an hour ago. So this one is like brand new, like freshly dug into. And it has the Dolphins, and they're scheduled to pick at 13. Drafting Tyler Warren, the tight end from Penn State. I have a feeling that is going to be a popular selection for Miami. So this is 6'6", 260-pound tight end. And if you're not familiar with Tyler Warren, he plays a little bit of everything for Penn State. He's inline, he's detached, he's in the backfield. They direct snap to him. He was an athlete at the high school level, so did much more as far as a diverse skill set and has really dove into tight end. And this is a position that I think does need an upgrade for this team. And it's important to distinguish there are different kinds of tight ends. So some fans may hear tight end, they just had Jonnu Smith that shattered all the receiving records. Jonnu Smith does not play the same position as Durham Smythe and Julian Hill. And I think you could make a pretty valid argument that after the guard spots on the offensive depth chart, the Y tight end position, which is your traditional hand in the dirt tight end, was the most erratic / underperforming position for the entire body of work of all the players that played it throughout the course of the season of any other position on the offensive side of the ball. And that's what my grades tell me looking at on a snap-by-snap basis, how well you are or are not performing your assignments. So this is a need for the Dolphins. Do I think it's a primary need for the Dolphins? Probably not, because you do have Jonnu and you do have guys under contract that have played the position, and one of them is a young developmental type player that you would at a minimum want some competition for, but it's not do or die at. But this is a pretty special player at this position. Tyler, big time receiving chops down the field, knows how to use his size to create separation in the middle of the field. He's got arrogant hands, wins the catch point. When he wants to in line and he wants to knock guys off, go watch the Oregon game, the Big Ten championship game, and the college football playoff showcases for him were a good performance of what he does in line as well. He can really move some bodies around. He's a blend of traits that you don't have. And a pretty special athlete with the way that Penn State used him. He was being the featured player of the Penn State offense in the passing game this past year. So not mad about it at all. A couple of the players that this mock had the Dolphins passing on, Malachi Starks, safety from Georgia, went the very next pick to the Colts. Jalen Walker, Georgia pass rusher, went 15 to the Falcons. Luther Burden at wide receiver went 19 to the Bucks. Another tight end, Colston Loveland, who's a little bit more overlap with Jonnu Smith, goes to the Broncos. Emeka Buka goes at 21. Josh Simmons, offensive tackle, Ohio State, who has some experience playing both sides of the line of scrimmage, which we know this Dolphins brain trust loves. He lasts till 26, but he's coming off of a season-ending injury. So those are some names that popped to me as names that the Dolphins passed on, courtesy of Josh Edwards of CBS in this brand new mock that just dropped. But Dane Brugler, friend, been in the space a long time, one of the best in the industry. He put one out at the beginning of this week, and it was a 2-round mock. He put it out 2 days ago. And here's who he had the Dolphins take. At 13, Will Campbell, offensive lineman. He's listed at tackle/guard, LSU Tigers. This was the consensus top offensive lineman coming into this season, going back to the summer. Has been a 3-year starter at tackle for LSU, but I do think from a length and foot speed perspective, he is a much better and safer projection inside at guard. Now, you could talk about returning the coach and returning the general manager and what that means as far as understanding norms and how they typically approach their conducting of business. But this is the spot where I think you kind of have to change how you conduct your business if you're going to apply the lessons that you learned from this year and give yourself a better chance next year to be a more complete offense. So Campbell, for me, is a guard. I have him graded as a guard. Can he get you through stretches of play at tackle? Yes. Do I think he'd be a tackle in this system? No. Would he be an improvement at guard over what you have? Yes. He is a plus mover for being in the 320s. And that's more mass automatically than any of the Dolphins guards had last year. And he brings a significant more amount of punch power, displacement, both with his hands and with his feet. And in the run game, he's capable of uprooting. So it gives you more diversity with how you can approach a run game. And he's used to playing tackle, pretty good pass protector as well. I know that's been a thing for both Liam and Rob Jones. That's kind of bitchy at times. So I don't mind this pick. It's an off the path of how the Dolphins have ran their business perspective and positional value perspective. And that would be the thing that worries me about seeing this actually come to life, especially because I think his pathway to playing in the NFL is more narrow to be guard exclusive at the next level. And he's more of a get by option at tackle as compared to some guys that you can project favorably at tackling, gives you a little bit more flexibility for what your combination of 5 guys looks like. In the second round, Dane gave the Dolphins Harold Fannin Jr., tight end, Bowling Green. This is a flex tight end. This is not a Tyler Warren type. This is more of a Jonnu Smith heir. That would be this pick. And I think you can get into some really fascinating stuff with 12 personnel and potentially 13 personnel. And I'd love to see the Dolphins kind of, especially if they're going to transition away from 10, get into some more base 2 tight end sets for the passing game and what you can do with that, but that's going to promote you being more under center runs more frequently than what the Dolphins have been. So there's some give and some take and some adjustment and some tweaking for something like this to take place, unless Harold Fannin's just going to be, hey, we're not going to do anything with Jonnu Smith's contract. He's going to play out this year. He's going to hit free agency, and we're going to groom you to be the replacement. But man, he is a big-time receiver, Harold Fannin. I'd say he's a better receiver than Tyler Warren, but he's not as effective as a blocker. It's not close. I think Warren's probably equally competitive with the ball in his hands as far as run after catch. Fannon's probably a touch faster. And he's longer, but he's 240, 245 as compared to being 260. So if you want mass, Warren in the first round would probably be the pathway at tight end that would kind of grease your wheels, if you know what I mean. Now, we have a lot more to come. We have USA Today, Pro Football Focus, Tankathon, the 33rd team to get into as far as additional mock drafts for the Dolphins on this Friday mock draft roundup. That's coming your way next here on Locked On Dolphins. Make sure you guys stick with us. It's playoff time, and if you're like me, you want to make the most of these final weeks of football, and that's where Prize Picks comes in. If you love football and want a chance to win real money watching the games, Prize Picks is the place for you. It's the best way to turn your sports opinions into cash with daily fantasy player projections. With Prize Picks, you simply pick more or less on player stats like total passing yards or rushing touchdowns for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your money. You can make your picks in less than 60 seconds, and whether you're looking for a flex play to boost your payout or cash out quickly, Prize Picks has you covered with over 10 million members and billions in winnings. It's clear people love Prize Picks. There's a special offer for our Locked On NFL listeners. Download the app today. Use code Locked On NFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Prize Picks. Run your game. Download the app today. Prize Picks. Use code Locked On NFL. Get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, our next one comes courtesy of a good friend of mine, Jeff Risden, from DraftWire and USA Today. And this one, with the Dolphins picking at 13, it's another new name. It has the Dolphins drafting Nick Scorton, defensive end from Texas A&M. And depending on what happens with Bradley Chubb, and we've kind of touched on it over the last week, 2 weeks, about the Dolphins really have four big decisions to make as far as how they're going to strategize cap compliance and long-term and short-term strategy for improving the roster or downgrading at a certain spot and putting somebody else in and finding the best way to optimize your roster construction opportunities for this year. And those four big contracts that you have to make decisions on in some way, shape, or form is what do you do with Tua Tagovailoa's contract as far as do you restructure it? Do you not restructure it? There's $25 million in base salary that they can restructure and create about $20 million in cap space. If they wanted to, they could snap their fingers with that contract. They say, well, it's guaranteed money either way. We're just going to write the check and send it. And then you could prorate it out and create $20 million in cap space. But the downside, of course, to that is this is a player that has a durability history that's troublesome and came back to bite you in the rear end this year. And if you choose to do that and things don't go well again in 2025, now you're really stuck. You've pushed more cash back and really made an even bigger mess for yourself. So that's one. Two is Bradley Chubb. You could post June 1st Bradley Chubb, save almost $20 million in cap space on that one, but you can't tap into that money until after June 1st. You could also potentially keep Bradley Chubb, not open up a need for your roster, keep him on the roster this year since you paid him all year this year to get healthy, and restructure him. And you could create, it's close to $13 million in cap space by restructuring Bradley Chubb. And then the out and avenue after that is still digestible for 2026. Tron Armstead, there's a decision on retirement, and then the team has a decision to make with obviously Patrick Paul looming in the wings, and Tyreek Hill has become the squeaky wheel. And as much as they want to put the toothpaste back in the tube, I don't think that's going to happen. So that's the big four. And if among the big four, they choose to commit to parting ways with Bradley Chubb, a player like Nick Scorton, I can totally see making sense. He's a powerful player. Played this past year 280 pounds. I think he'd probably be more optimized if he played a little lighter than that. But this is not Chop Robinson as far as speed off the edge, speed to power conversion, freakish athletic traits. He's a good athlete for his size, but he reminds me a little bit more of like the coming out of South Carolina version of Melvin Ingram about 10 years ago. And Dolphins fans got a taste of Melvin Ingram as a late stage player, but when he first came in the league for the Chargers, man, he was electric for the ways that he could move around your front and be a chess piece. And I'm sure Anthony Weaver would love that. I think he's less dynamic and a little bit more like pass rush cerebral than some of the other edge rushers in this class. We already mentioned Jalen Walker from the Georgia Bulldogs, who I think is probably the ideal fit for the scheme that you're running right now. Michael Williams from Georgia, who's a little bit more Trayvon Walker-y, is more dynamic, I think, than what Nick Scorton is. James Pierce from Tennessee, but that's a 240-pound pass rusher, and he kind of went the speed rush pathway with Chop, and it's working, and now it's up to Chop to kind of continue to diversify his game, and as he does that, it has the potential to be really scary. But it is a player from a front perspective and the diversity of the fronts and how the Dolphins like to, especially under Anthony Weaver, get these guys to drop out. It's a player that fits the mold, even if it's not my favorite edge defender in the class. And for what it's worth, Jalen Walker is available in Jeff Risdon's mock for USA Today as well. The Dolphins ultimately don't go that direction. Now, another good friend, Trevor Sikkema, Pro Football Focus. This one's about a week and a half old, but I wanted to put this one on here because of the name. Nick Scorton, who we just got done talking about that Jeff Risdon gave, goes 9 to the Saints in this one, so he's off the board. So too is Jalen Walker, the other pass rusher that we talked about being a potential fit. So Trevor has the Dolphins going with Josh Simmons, so offensive tackle from Ohio State. And Josh Simmons, originally from San Diego, played at San Diego State, was listed in the recruitment rankings coming out of high school as a guard, then played at right tackle at San Diego State, and then has played left tackle the last 2 years for Ohio State. Penalties were a big issue for him between his freshman and sophomore seasons, 25 in 2 seasons. And then this year became a totally different player. Totally different player. And he got hurt against Oregon. And I know that there's the comments are going to be filled with, "Oh, Josh Simmons is perfect for the Dolphins because he's a player with a medical background." Get your jokes. Go right ahead. It's fine. I get it. I understand. But this is a player that, had he not got hurt, is where you're probably talking about getting drafted by the Patriots in the top 5. The tape was that good. So here's the interesting thing about Josh Simmons. Josh Simmons, for me, would be like a Laramie Tunsil type situation where he falls because of circumstances beyond what he's physically capable of and what his tape shows that he is. Would you have liked him to play the full season, to see him play against Penn State and Tennessee, to go against Abdul Carter and James Pierce, who are projected top 20 picks as pass rushers? Yes, absolutely. We didn't get that. But the tape doesn't lie. This guy allowed 1 pressure on almost 160 pass blocking reps for that season. So he's a plus pass protector, 6'5", 310 pounds, probably the best athlete and mover of the tackles in this class. Really light feet, really explosive out of his stance, shows good grip strength, has tackle length, but has guard background going back to high school. So for the Dolphins, whether that's Patrick Paul at left tackle, Austin Jackson at right tackle, Josh Simmons at left guard, long term, you figure it out. He's got tackle upside, so it makes it a premium position, which this team has liked to try to prioritize with their early draft picks. I don't mind the competition for Patrick Paul, because if Simmons beats him out, now Paul can compete with Austin Jackson, or maybe you move Paul to the right side full time after an offseason, and Austin can move back inside the guard where he played early in his career. Like, the combinations gives you flexibility with a guy like Josh Simmons. And I don't dislike the idea of getting competition for Patrick Paul, and then you're planning on moving forward, presumably without Teron Armstead, and certainly without Kendall Lamb, who said at the beginning of the year that he's going to retire. So now you've got 3 tackles and some flexibility. And the more flexibility you have, particularly on the line, and hopefully you let a guy start at a spot and sit in a spot, makes a lot of sense. It doesn't alleviate all your problems, but it does alleviate and give you more pathways to putting the most highly competitive offensive line on the field that you can. But more on that in just a minute, because we got 2 more mocks, including my own from Monday for the 30-13. That's next. Stick with us. This is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes is waiting and wondering and worrying if you're going to get any money back this year, and then waiting and wondering and worrying some more. Now, Taxes is matching with TurboTax Expert, who do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return, while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible, file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now, this is taxes. Get an expert now at TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Just save the best for last. I'm biased, but I think the 30-13 one is pretty neat because it's mine. So we'll talk about that one in just a minute. But we're going to do tankathon.com next. Tankathon, of course, is the site and the resource that down the home stretch throughout the course of the season, you're keeping a watchful eye on, because it updates based off strength of schedule in real time what the current draft order is at any given point. And their mock draft with the 13th pick, just to touch base on some of the other names that the other mocks have given, Will Campbell goes 9 in this mock draft to the Saints. The Tyler Warren at 14 to the Colts, so the pick after the Dolphins. Nick Scorton goes at 16 to the Cardinals, and then Josh Simmons goes at 18 to the Seahawks. Dolphins get Jalen Walker, pass rusher from Georgia, in this mock draft. So another pass rush avenue, and this is the one that I think makes a lot of sense. If amongst the big 4 contract decisions that the team has to make, they choose to part ways with Bradley Chubb. And if they do, this for me is the player in the pass rush room that does the things that most directly correlate to what the Dolphins showed they want to be this year on defense. You got Chop Robinson dropping out and playing hook zones, and he's more than athletic enough to do it. But the player who I thought did it best was the player who had experience in the system doing it, and that was Tyus Bowser before he ended the season on IR. And you go back to Tyus Bowser and what he was in college coming out of the University of Houston, a hybrid player who could play off the ball, could play on the edge, could rush the passer. That's Jalen Walker, but I think Jalen Walker is significantly more powerful than Tyus Bowser. I think he's probably longer than Tyus Bowser. I think he has better pass rush counters because he's got more violent hands than Tyus Bowser. And Tyus Bowser didn't give you a lot of positive contributions in the pass game as a pass rusher. It's just kind of an older player who dealt with injuries and is kind of getting towards the end of what his path as an NFL player is going to look like. But he knew the system. So he did a really nice job, I thought, with getting into some zone drops and dropping underneath and taking away throwing windows as he's lined up as a pass rush threat and then drops out because they're bringing somebody else from the other side of the formation to manipulate protections. And he goes, oh, you're going to shift the center this way. Well, you're going to be +2 to this side and you're going to be -1 to the other side of the formation because that's where we're actually bringing our 4th pass rusher from. Like those kinds of games and simulated pressures. Jalen Walker is a edge player who also played off the ball at Georgia. I don't think he's a very viable stack like off-ball player to pair with Jordan Brooks. There's players in this class that can do that I think make a lot of sense. The Dolphins do not get one in the 2nd round of this mock draft from Tankathon. They do get a player I like a lot, and that's Nick Eamon-Worry, a supersized safety from South Carolina. This guy's 6'3", 225 pounds, and ran down Jalen Milroe, the quarterback from Alabama, in the open field. Like, consumed an angle and ran him down. Big-time tackler, good ball skills, is better low than he is on the roof. So you think about how down the stretch, the team kind of embraced, I think, playing Javon Holland a little bit lower and down close to the line of scrimmage more frequently, and had Poyer be the guy who got everybody lined up playing in the high post, even though he wasn't, a particularly rangy player at this stage of his career. Eamon Worry would be the player that would benefit from playing in the intermediates more frequently than playing as a single high post player. But man, is he a violent striker? Is he a big-time tackler? He's got good instincts, and that obviously addresses your safety need. So I'd like that for the Dolphins quite a bit. And that's a heck of an infusion into the defensive side of the ball. But you would need to make sure that your free agency class reflects some of your needs on offense if you're going to go defense with both of your first two picks. Which brings us to my mock draft. The one that I did on Monday. I am dropping one throughout the playoff season every Monday throughout the cycle with some updates, and obviously the order changes on the back end of it, and you're getting some coaching hiring, so some ideas of what schemes looks like. So there's enough different and enough dominoes where it shakes up every Monday. Of the players mocked to Miami and the other 5, Jalen Walker in this mock by yours truly goes 9 to the Saints. Will Campbell goes 11 to the San Francisco 49ers. Tyler Warren goes 14 to the Indianapolis Colts. That's a popular one. You expect to see a lot of that. Josh Simmons goes 17 to the Cincinnati Bengals, who need to get their offensive line right as well. And then Nick Scorton gets drafted at 26 in this mock to the Washington Commanders. I go offensive line here. And it's a lot of the same conversation, but it's a player that I think is every bit as appealing of a fit for Miami. And the conversation we just had about Josh Simmons without the medical tag and a full body of work this season. And it's Josh Conerly from Oregon. And if you're not familiar with his game, check it out. Man, this is a very dynamic player. And he's another guy just like Josh Simmons who made big-time technical strides this year. He shined in the Big Ten championship game against Penn State and their pass rushers, and that included Abdul Carter and Danny Dennis-Sutton, who would have been a fringe top 100 type guy, went back to school. I'll read the synopsis that I have on this pick. It's one thing to lose a bet on a position group. It's another thing to do so altogether when all the evidence suggested the options were unsatisfactory to begin with. Drafting a player destined for guard is a somewhat unsavory idea this early in the draft, but Miami needs to get serious about their trenches given the addition of Mike Vrabel to the division and the Dolphins' woeful run game in 2024. Incumbents Robert Jones and Liam Eichenberg were backups in 2023, took starting jobs into 2024 despite being questionable at best scheme fits. It went poorly, and now both are expiring contracts. Conerly is a perfect scheme fit for the wide zone scheme, whether he lands at left tackle, right tackle, or ultimately kicks inside to play guard in 2024 or in 2025 next to 2024 rookie Patrick Paul or veteran Teron Armstead. So obviously there's a lot of flux as far as like Teron and what his decision is, what the team's decision is, and all that stuff. But regardless, this is a player who can solve a long-term and a short-term problem for you in getting more competitive along the offensive line with the tackle upside to kind of sell the premium position thirst that this team seems to have. So there's 6 mock drafts for you with 6 different names, which made it fun. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you like some of the draft talk, again, I just dropped the top 100 over at the 33rd team. Lots of names and some sweet spots in value. We're going to get into all that kind of stuff over the next 3 months. Of course, we have to continue debriefing the 2024 season, looking at individual position rooms and the scouting reports of those players and what it looks like moving forward. We're going to do some superlatives for the team next week as well. Then we have the college all-star events with the Shrine Bowl and the Senior Bowl, and I'm going to be at both of those. So we'll have kind of boots on the ground, kind of some primer stuff for those events for the Dolphins. Going to figure out what's going on as far as head coaching hires and if it impacts the Dolphins with Anthony Weaver and his interest. Figure out who the special teams coordinators. Like there's a lot. Don't let them tell you the offseason means it's a dead period. So we get a lot to cover here on Locked On Dolphins. We'll have you cover your team every day. Appreciate you guys as always for checking out the show. I'll talk to you all again soon.